Well, hello and welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast. I am glad that you're listening once again. We have some faithful listeners out there. Every single week we grow in our listening audience, and we'd like to welcome you back if you're listening for another week in a row. We'd like to also welcome those that listen for the first time this week. Maybe that's because of you hearing the sermon on Sunday and realizing I need a little bit more on that. That's what Beyond Sunday is for. We connect your Sunday to Sunday. We address some of the things that we talked about in the recent sermons, and we look ahead to what's coming up. Maybe it's a sermon, maybe it's an event, maybe it's an emphasis that we have going on today, and we actually have somebody in the podcast room today that's going to speak to us about something we have coming up. So let me start by introducing who's around the table today. That person I'm talking about is our missions coordinator, April Oates.
Hello.
So good to have you, April. We also have Paxton Red
Hey.
and Justin Eschenball.
Oh, what's
and
up?
as always, Mixmaster Tate behind the board. He's over here. You can't see him, but you heard him a couple weeks ago. Sorry, Marianne, that he didn't speak a little bit longer, but hopefully we'll get him in there in the future. But we'd like to welcome you, like we said, to the Beyond Sunday podcast. Paxton, do you remember what we talked about on Sunday?
Pastor Kevin shared a great message on what do we do to battle against the lie that Satan wants us to believe that we are not enough. And so we talked about the story of Elisha and how we can learn from Elisha on battling the lie that Satan tells you, I'm not enough.
So we've been talking about lies. That's kind of the whole premise of this whole sermon series. Paxton, you started out the first sermon in the series. What was it?
Yeah, talking about the fact that Satan tells us that there will always be time.
There will always be time. This week, I'm not enough. I love how Kevin started the sermon. It's kind of like epic, like, I am not enough. And it got me thinking. He actually pointed out this week to me that I have gray hair now.
Kevin pointed that out to you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Kevin, thank you. I saw it in the mirror, and I thought that nobody noticed.
I think that's misery loves company.
Yeah. That's what it is. But there was a lot of talk about hair on Sunday. There was also some lies that you believe about yourself. And so I would just want to ask around the table, what are some things that you guys have believed about yourself that as you've gotten older, as you experience life, you've realized that's just not true?
So one of the areas where I feel like at the end of the day, I'm not enough is I never get my list done. I never get as many things accomplished in a day that I wanted to do, needed to do, think I should have been able to do in that amount of time. And so it leaves me feeling like I'm not enough at the end of the day. And the more I'm having a conversation with the Lord about this, the more I'm realizing that I'm never going to be enough to do that, because whatever I'm trying to do in my own strength is in vain. So when I can start my day and ask the Lord to orchestrate my day around His priorities for that day, it many times leads to nothing getting done on my list, but things getting done that He wants me to do. And that's so much more fulfilling. So
Right.
I've had to just stop the lie of me not being enough because I didn't do what I thought I should do that day.
The checklist was not checked.
Right. And that's sometimes okay.
I think for me, being a performer, and that's something that I think I grew up being. I was always in the little children's musicals at church. I was always involved in the music program and the art program, even from as long as I can remember in preschool. I remember coloring a color page in preschool and being in a competition with another girl whose name was Hannah, that she would always win the coloring competition, and I did not know why, because I felt like I was coloring like I was supposed to. And even from that young age, I remember feeling like the competition of performing and making sure that I am doing, it was magnified. And I've always been fairly good at music and art, and when I got to college, the ocean got bigger. I was not a big fish in a little pond anymore. I was one of the little fish in the humongous ocean. And I realized my position. I realized that I can't base who I am. I can't look at who I am and what I can do in light of comparing myself to somebody else. because not only does that steal my joy, but that defeats me. And so the way God redeemed that for me is he started revealing, like, I've called you to be this person. Rather than comparing yourself to somebody else, why don't you compare yourself to what I've called you to be? And that has supremely redeemed who I am as a person.
I love it. I remember those coloring contests. I hated them with a passion. For those who don't know, I'm colorblind, and so I hated. But let me guess. I remember vividly the kid that always won the coloring contest. Did Hannah color really dark around the edge and light in the middle?
That's exactly it, and it made no sense to me.
They always won.
They always won. Like, that's not the way you color. April's pursing her lips. That's the way April colored, and she probably won all the art contests.
And I have my box of 64 crayons.
They were always sharpened.
I did not win any contests, but I did like to outline in dark.
And then color
Shade
light.
in the-
Yeah.
Well, one of the lies that I believed in, it kind of is close to what you said, Josh, about comparing yourself to who God has called us to be, not others around us. But all growing up, middle school, I was a very shy guy. Like, absolutely was terrified of talking to other people or presenting in class. And that was the lie I believed about myself, was that I would never have anything good enough to say to someone else. I would never have the confidence or ability to speak. And I remember in 8th grade, I had to present this big presentation in front of the class, and I just stood there. And I had an object that I had to hold up to show the class, and I was just frozen. I literally could not move my arms. I couldn't move any part of my body, and I just turned flush red, like completely fire truck red, couldn't move. And fast forward a few years, I started getting involved in church, and my sister made me get plugged into teaching. And it was this big thing I had to deal with, which was whether I'm going to start teaching and get over this lie that I'm believing about myself that I can't speak, or, fall into it and stick with that. And one of the things that really helped me get out of that was believing in that I'm going to be who God has created me to be.
That's the value that we find when we look to what God actually says about us.
Because what God has to say is so much more than what we can
Right.
see, right? And that was one of the things in Kevin's sermon that he brought out in the story of Elisha, was that there's so much more going on than what we can see. And so Elisha prays so his servant can see everything around. And when he was talking about that, I just couldn't help but think, Lord, I want to see like that. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to see all that you're doing around me, the things that everyone else misses. Like, I want to be able to see you at work. And so here's my question, and thinking about that story, do you think that's how Elisha saw all the time?
I was wondering the same thing. It's like, it doesn't say that he automatically saw it, right? So it's like he saw it the whole time.
Yeah.
And then he had to ask the Lord to reveal it. Maybe he saw every step of life that way.
Yeah, that would be incredible to be able to just know everywhere that God is working around you and being able to see it.
That would make doing the work of God much easier.
Sure. Yeah.
If you really actually saw it. But, as you say that, I can see God working.
Absolutely.
Honestly.
That's true.
And we talked about it on Sunday, and I loved the story of Aaron Smith and Jackson Smith. Aaron was our 1,000th baptism. Jackson was 1,001.
Yeah.
And it's like he's the first one of the next 1,000. And I love that because, no, numbers do not dictate what we do, and numbers do not say that we're successful,
Right.
but numbers definitely do reveal some things. Mm-hmm. And if we're not watching that, then sometimes you miss out on that. And if we are consciously looking and spiritually looking around us, we will see where God's moving.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Josh, I think you said that on a previous podcast. We find what we're looking for. And it's not hard to see God working every single day
Absolutely.
for it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get focused on the enemy that is coming at us, that we're not looking for God working in the midst. We're not looking for God working around us in the midst of trouble, in the midst of pain.
I mean, wouldn't it be cool if we see him work every day? What if we could see him work every hour? What if we could see him work every minute? What if we lived minute by minute, seeing what he sees, having the eternal view of things?
Or maybe Elisha didn't see that way all the time, and he just had that much faith and confidence that God was at work, that he was like, Lord, open his eyes so he can see what I know, even though I can't
Right.
see it, but I know it's there.
Well, yeah, sometimes our circumstances are overwhelming. Sometimes we feel inadequate in moments, but steps of faith coming from the confidence that God has given us because he's always there, always with us, going before us, coming behind us, standing beside us. That's the thing that we need to be bold in.
Yeah.
God's proven himself already. We can't think, well, if God just does this, or if God just does this, then I'll move. God has already proven himself over and over again. And so for us to be aware of that gives us the boldness and the faith to step into those.
Yeah, that's good because God has already acted, right?
Right.
He's already taken the step, and now he's calling us to take the step. And that was one of the points that Kevin brought out that kind of seems counterintuitive to the Christian walk, was that he said, sometimes you have to do more. Mm-hmm. And I think about a couple of stories in Scripture. I think about when they crossed the Jordan, right? The water didn't stop until they got their feet wet. Until they were willing to step into the water, it didn't stop. And so Kevin said, sometimes we have to act yourself into a new way of thinking. Most of the time we want to flip that around. I just got to think differently and then I'll act differently. Mm-hmm. And he said exact opposite. We have to act ourselves into a new way of thinking. So if you change the way you act, it'll change the way you think. You guys believe that?
Walking out obedience will then lead to the heart change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a practice thing. Mm-hmm. Faith is a practice thing.
For sure.
If we never take steps of faith, we don't understand how faith actually works. We never get to recount the moments where God in himself was faithful. We don't get to remember the moments where I was nervous, but I did it, and what a reward it was.
Yeah.
And that's honestly what the Christian life is about. When God calls us to go. And one of the reasons we have April here today is because we're actually getting ready to launch into our end of the year missions offering.
Yes.
We affectionately around the office call it YEMO, year-end missions offering. April, tell us a little bit about that. You talked about it in the service transition, but remind us what that is.
Sure. So many of you have participated in this in years past, but for those new to New Work or new to the podcast, we have an offering we collect in November and December, finalizing the last Sunday of the year. And all of that money is given directly to mission partners that New Work supports. So we meet the needs of local, national, and global mission partners through the generous giving of the church.
And I love that. It's not like New Work's hoarding the money.
Right.
It's like what people give, and we do have a goal. We never say the goal, but we do have a goal in mind because we know what our partners need. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the year, we take what has been given and we go, let's bless these partners. And Newark is that place that does that. We're not trying to recreate some ministry that somebody else in our town is already doing or going on some mission trip that's already being done just with another organization.
Right.
We're partnering with those people. And it's amazing to see that when we give to Newark, this is not just a saying. When you give to Newark, you give through Newark. You are making an impact when you give to the year-end mission offering.
Yeah.
Not only here, not only in Kentucky, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And in the next few months, next couple months, we only have a couple months left of the year, but April's going to be talking to us a little bit more about the different ministry partners. You're going to be receiving some documentation that shows you and outlines kind of what we did in the past, this past year, and also looks ahead to what we have coming up.
Absolutely. And I think, this allows the people who are already doing the work to do even more of the work and to do it better. It just provides additional resources and enables them to serve more people and to represent Christ well to those people that they serve.
Yeah, what I love are stories. When people come back from international mission trips, you hear a lot of stories. Man, maybe it was their first time. I've never been on a mission trip, and now I'm pumped, and I can't wait to go on the next one. People make life-altering changes and decisions about themselves based on getting involved in missions. April, do you have any stories that you can think of? And you're free to name some names, even if you want to, of our own people from this past year. Maybe somebody on your mind that you can think of that had an awesome experience in the mission field.
We had 47 people go on mission trips this year. 20 of those people had never been on a mission trip.
Wow.
And they all came back changed. One of the people that comes to mind is Megan Sledge.
Oh, yeah.
So Megan went to Lebanon, Tennessee back in April to Rest Stop Ministries. She was one of a group of 10 ladies that went to help. We fixed up a home, just did yard work, cleaning, painting, those kind of things, to prepare for a fundraiser that Rest Stop was holding in June. And hearing the stories of the lives impacted by Rest Stop and what they do to help ladies 18 and up who've been rescued from sex trafficking, and how having a safe place for them to live and be restored and healed, it was just life-changing for Megan, and you could tell.
Yeah.
And it's just really kind of lit the fire in her for missions all over.
I love when people come back. And Megan, if you're listening, you are doing an awesome job at being a follower of Christ. I love watching her family and how they interact with not only the church, but how they get involved in all the different things, even their daughter.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be a mission trip. I mean, I had somebody come up to me last week who has been donating through her small group for local mission projects. And for those of you who aren't aware, each of our small groups have a mission coordinator. We have projects throughout the year, usually quarterly, sometimes more, where we help donate items to our local partners, or we'll host an event. Maybe we have a pumpkin party at the Challenge House, or maybe we have a dinner for some people who need one. Somebody came up and said, "Hey, I know we just turned our stuff in last week, but do we have another project yet? I'm ready to start collecting."
Yeah,
so it's great. It doesn't have to be a trip. You can do missions in your everyday life.
It's contagious. And that's what I love about what we get to do at New Work. There's international mission trips for the people that can do it. Maybe they got some time off, and those are super impactful, getting to experience a different culture and a different people group, and just how that changes your perspective about life. But then you also get to see within our country's borders, different states, and you get to get involved in that. But our small groups, people ask, "Oh, how can I get in? I can't go on a trip. I can't leave." But every single week, if you're not involved in a small group and you want to do missions, get involved in a small group. That's the best way to get involved in missions.
Yes, and if you don't know how to do that, April at newworkfellowship.com will get you connected with a small group or one of our community mission projects that we do here locally. And Josh, I wanted to mention also, speaking of stories, this is the first year that we've actually had children go on an international mission trip. So we had 3 of our children go to Peru supporting our mission trip there. And the partner there has come back to us. Your Mission Matters is the partner that we went with. They came back to us and said, "Hey, we'd love for you to come again, and can you bring more children?"
That's awesome. Well, I love those pictures because those kids were playing soccer with the other kids.
Yes.
And, it's not always like blood, sweat, and tears on a mission trip. It's getting involved with the people and sharing the love of Christ.
Yes.
So earlier you said some numbers. You said 47 people went this year on a mission trip.
They did. Mm-hmm.
What about some other numbers? I always love to hear some things.
So 47 people went on 4 trips. 20 of those were their first trip ever. And I know, Josh, you said that we have a goal and we usually don't share the goal. So, we're not going to publish this year's goal, but I will tell you that last year we gave over $150,000 to missions.
That's amazing.
So there were 15 local partners, 7 national partners, and 15 global partners that were recipients of that money. And it's grown every year. And what's happened is it started out as end-of-year mission offering. It's turned into a year-round mission offering because some of you have received the blessing of giving. So now you give to the year-end mission offering, and then you also say, "Hey, you know what? I think I might do this again in June, or I may make this a quarterly gift," because you see the impact.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, even things like disaster relief. We get to see those moments when over the year that we've remembered disasters hitting our country, or even different places where maybe our partner is, we were able to move immediately because people gave to disaster relief
Before they happened.
before
right?
it even happened.
We know those things are coming, and so our people are so generous and thinking ahead. Like, let's just go ahead and give. That way they can respond when it happens.
Yes, and we were able to give 2 gifts. We gave a gift before it happened, and then we gave another after to a couple of different places because we knew how impactful this hurricane season was. A couple other numbers, Josh. We had 14 small groups engaged in giving this year. They participated in over 30 projects. And then we had over 60 volunteers that helped when we go to the Feeding America project at the fairgrounds. Over 60 people from Newark came. We fed over 1,000 households.
Right here in Hopkinsville.
Yes. And it was over 50,000 pounds of food.
That's amazing.
So you talk about the servant not being able to see in the passage that Kevin talked about. The servant couldn't see what Elisha saw. But April, I mean, like, you just reading this to me is like opening my eyes to what our church is doing here, you know, and what the Lord is doing through New Work and just through the believers here. And sometimes, you know, we might not see physical flaming chariots on the hillside. Sometimes we just hear about what God's doing, and that's enough to just completely overwhelm us and see like, oh my gosh, the Lord is working here.
So, April, tell us a little bit about the collection day. I know you said it's towards the end of the year, but can you give some details on that?
Sure. So December the 29th is the day that we will be collecting. That doesn't mean you can't give now.
Right.
So if you give to missions, if you open your app and go to the giving, then there is an option to give towards missions. So the money that is given towards missions during November and December is what we're going to count towards this year-end mission offering. And then that money will go directly for our mission partners.
Yeah, and maybe people aren't ready to give. What are the things that they can do now to begin preparing their hearts? Obviously, it is pray.
Absolutely. You can pray. You can also look at the missions page on the app, and it shows some of the partners where we're going on trips next year. It shows some of the organizations that we gave to last year. You can also take a walk down the mission hallway.
Oh,
Look
yeah.
at the TVs.
Hey, that's a new development, right?
Absolutely. Just turned up this last week. And you can look at that and see examples of how it's playing out. You don't have to give financially. Many people have more time than money, and the Lord doesn't care. The giving can be whatever it is that's a sacrifice to Him. He can use that, and He can multiply it. He can use it for His good. So if you have more time than money, that's great. If you are a prayer warrior, we value that.
Absolutely. I mentioned it earlier, but on Sunday we are handing out a kind of like a missions pamphlet that you can read through. On it are some things. Justin has been working on it with April this past week. Justin, what are some things on the actual document that people can be praying through?
Yeah, so on the front of this document it has all of the partners that we are sponsoring and that we are partnered with through New Work. And so if you could be praying through, you could go grab one of these things when you get it and just choose one of the partners and pray through it with them. And then on the back of it, it has a whole little section that says, how can you get involved with missions? And it'll give you 3 different points of how you yourself, as a member of New Work or even just a first-time guest, could get involved with missions and what that would look like.
It's very familiar. You can know, grow, and go.
Yeah.
So on the back, of course, go is the biggest one dealing with missions. But first you got to know and you got to grow, and then you can go.
And I think, Josh, the thing is, we are all missionaries every day. So I would just encourage you, even if you're not ready to go on a trip, if you're not ready to give, your daily interactions with people can become more missional. The way you talk with people and the way you influence those around you can be leading them to Christ by how you interact. Just having a missional mindset, I believe, back to what you were saying, Paxton, if we act out of obedience, then the heart change follows sometimes. I believe that the Lord will grow your heart for missions. The more you do, the more you want to do.
Yep.
I went to college in Raleigh, North Carolina at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and one of my classes there was evangelism. And I thought, I'm in the middle of the Bible Belt. How is there going to be any way that I'm going to evangelize to someone by the end of this class? And it is just like in the middle of this like little Christian bubble, there are so many places that I could have gone, and we did go, and our professor like took us out into the field, which was so good, and showed us that your everyday life is a mission field. The grocery store, just your neighborhood, and just every part of your life is filled with those opportunities. So I think that's where we start, is right where we are before we go.
So not only will you hear about missions on Sunday, but we continue our Factory Reset sermon series. We talked in the very first week that Satan sends lies on both sides of the truth. So this week, Pastor Michael is up. Pastor Kevin talked about the lie, I am not enough. And Michael this week is going to talk about the lie, I got this. So we're going to get to the other side of this lie and see what the Lord has to say to us.
I cannot wait. But before Sunday, I got to throw this in here. Before Sunday, we have a big old event coming up.
Come on.
If you're listening to this on Wednesday, you are in luck because on Thursday, there is a night of worship that is happening. And you're going to want to be there. But it's at 6:30 at Newark Fellowship. Thursday night, November 14th. It's going to be an awesome time. It's called Ever Present. That's the theme of the night, talking about God going with us, God being going before us and coming behind us. And I was looking at some scripture today, and in Ephesians 2:10 it says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things that He has planned for us long ago." And just thinking about this past week and the lie that you are not enough, realize that God is at work in your life, and He is constantly molding and shaping you. Every experience that you have, every hardship, every mountaintop experience is purposeful in developing you into the person that God's created you to be. And so for this night of worship, we invite you to come just push pause on the week, take all the distractions away, and come and worship a God that is always with you and is always building you to be the person that He's called you to be.
We thank you for joining us for another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. We would love for you to like and subscribe wherever you listen. We look forward to being with you again next week.
See ya.